It's called the National Institute of Standards and Technology, but it's commonly referred to as NIST, specifically NIST 800-171. Just the sound of this requirement makes some government contractors want to hide and run for cover. Tackling the myth, compliance may not be that difficult, almost easy, when broken down the right way. Join us as we explore the labyrinth of NIST compliance and the protection of unclassified information with our guest Ben Brooks, Vice President with Beryllium InfoSec Collaboration, on this episode of the Risk GovCon podcast. I'm your host, Brian Smith.
Welcome back to Risk GovCon, a podcast dedicated to government and defense contractors, all things business with regards to business development, risk and insurance, contractual compliance, as well as contractual work, getting contracts, and making sure you do a great job. And so today's episode, we're going to be focusing on cybersecurity. And I know you have, most likely as a government contracting professional, cyber fatigue. And we want to make this hopefully a very fruitful discussion for you, because we want to share with you some stories, some insight on this NIST 800-171. And there's a lot of concern about it from a variety of people in the GovCon space. And here today to add some clarity is we've got Ben Brooks, all the way in from Beryllium InfoSec Collaborative. And Ben contacted me recently about this topic. He comes by way of Minneapolis, Minnesota, and has an extensive level of experience, military as well as commercial work. Ben has, I believe, 18 years of military experience and currently in the reserve. Great story behind all that, but the bottom line is this guy knows cybersecurity. So we're not going to talk about an IT professional. We're going to talk about cybersecurity. So again, we're going to focus on this NIST 800-171. We're going to have three segments today. First one's going to be covering what NIST 800-171 actually is. Then we're going to follow it up with what have you seen? What are some of the things that are happening with this compliance and some of the aspects that we need to consider? And finally, we're going to have a third episode, and we're going to provide you with a template for success. So by the end of these three discussions, you should have a really good idea what needs to be done in order to be compliant with this very, very important cybersecurity program. Again, we've got Ben Brooks with us today. Ben, would you mind just sharing real quick a bit about your background, and then let's go ahead and roll into what NIST 800-171 is. So, Ben?
Yeah. Well, first, thanks for having me here, Brian. I really appreciate it. So my background is that I started with the military pretty much out of high school, and I was 11 years active duty in the Navy, and then I was with Special Warfare. I was on ship. I went to jump school. I went to the reserves because I wanted to have a family. A lot of that stuff is very operationally intensive. So I got out, joined the reserves. They sent me to dive school, ran the experimental diving unit, reserve detachment. But at the core of it, everything that I've done has pretty much been based around, other than diving, information and cybersecurity. So NIST 800-171.
Oh, wait. It's a pretty big stretch going from being a diver to a cybersecurity expert. I just got to ask you, how in the heck, just real quick, how'd you get there?
Well, you know how the Army has those MOSs?
Right.
The Navy has NECs, which are basically used to identify skill sets. The reserves saw the 53, which is special warfare and special duties, and they said, oh, you're a diver. And I said, not really, but if you want me to do that, always needs the Navy. Yes, sir, yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. And so I went.
There you go. All right. Let's dive right in then. Let's talk about this NIST 800-171 that has to be on every CXO's desk, on their mind. Let's talk about it. So let's just go ahead and roll with this.
Yeah. So the NIST 800-171 is a programmatic outline for handling controlled unclassified information. And controlled unclassified information is that kind of information that the U.S. government has stewarded to contractors and subcontractors and it's not owned by those individuals, but they have to keep it in their non-federally accredited systems, their information systems. But it also includes the paper hard copy and CDs and USB drives and everything. So again, we're going to talk a lot about cybersecurity, like you said, but it's really information security. It doesn't matter what medium it's on. It's about making sure that that information is being handled properly at all times, regardless of what medium it's in or what system it's on.
Why do we care about something like this? I mean, if you think about it, everybody's got information, and these government contractors have who knows what coming in, going out. So what is it? Why did this come about, and why should people care?
That is an awesome question. Really what it comes down to is NIST 800-171 and the DFARS requirements that say you shall take care of this information for the federal government is a national security play. We've had instances that have been recorded and some that are simply rumor that foreign states are hacking into not the government systems, not the contractor systems, though sometimes they are, but more often than not the subcontractor systems, because they haven't been protecting the information there. And while this controlled unclassified information is unclassified, when it gets compiled together with other bits and pieces, and these bad actors put this stuff in one place, it can quickly escalate into a national security concern.
What's the difference between somebody that's an IT professional and cybersecurity professional? It seems like there's a crossover. Is it true?
Well, you know, they both deal with information systems, computers, networking, etc. But really, the IT professional's job is to ensure the operability and ease of use of those information systems, whereas the security professional's concern is just the opposite, making sure that it is done in a secure manner at all times. Oftentimes, they go at odds. They're head-to-head. But in reality, what we want to see is that yin and that yang, right? We want to see that good balance. And even though security is sometimes going to provide some inconvenience, it should never, ever impede operations. We need to find ways to make sure that there's that good balance there, that we can operate and operate securely.
As a government contracting executive, have you ever found yourself training your insurance broker on your government contracting operations so they might get the right coverage you really need? Who's working for who? It may be time to consider the professionals with Risk Reconnaissance. Our unique blend of military experience, coupled with a deep understanding of risk and insurance, creates a client experience that is second to none. We understand a wide variety of GovCon considerations. You see, we embrace OCONUS operations, the multiple contract opportunities your team prepares for, and the time-sensitive delivery of workers' compensation rates needed to complete your proposals. Interested in learning more? Visit our website, theriskrecon.com. That's THERISKRECON.com for more details and to start a conversation. With Risk Reconnaissance, it's simple. You support the warfighter, we support you.
I think there's a lot of misnomers, maybe fact versus fiction about this. I've talked to clients that they're concerned about doing it, but it's going to cost money, it's going to take time, it's going to take resources. Can you give us a few points on fact or fiction that perhaps you've encountered as a professional or some of your clients have faced?
Yeah, absolutely. The fact of the matter is this is going to take some sort of spend for the organization, whether it's person hours or whether it's dollars. More often than not, it's going to be a little bit of both. What we do know 100%, and it has been a bit of a confusing point, is that if you handle controlled unclassified information, you must implement all of the 110 controls under the NIST 800-171. You cannot simply write down in a system security plan or a plan of action and milestones and just leave it alone. You actually have to implement all 110 of those points of assessment or controls.
110.
Yep.
That sounds pretty heavy.
Honestly, it could be a lot worse.
Really?
And that's a very Midwestern thing to say,
Yeah.
but it's the truth.
But if you're not a IT professional or a security specialist, you're a CXO.
Mm-hmm.
110 anything is going to be a lot, especially when your team's got to do it. What kind of resources are we looking for here? What does it take? What do we do?
Yeah. Well, again, it's a program that needs to be implemented. And so it's not just a list of technologies that need to be put in place and operated. It is an entire program of how do we handle this information? What training are we giving to all of our people? Are we implementing the correct technologies? And when we have them implemented, are we monitoring them? Are we making sure that they're operating securely on a regular basis? Do we have the difference between IT and security so that we don't have the fox guarding the hen house? So again, there's a lot going on here. There's no question about that. And is it the right thing to do? Absolutely. Can small businesses tackle this on their own? That's questionable.
Why is that?
Well, it is a lot of spend. We did some analysis on the back end and with some of our clients, and it turns out that this program can take up to 2,000 person hours a year to maintain, and oftentimes can be about $250,000, and that's on the light side of spend to implement these technologies out of the gate, right? And then, of course, you have to hire somebody. If you don't have a security professional, you're going to have to hire one to avoid that collusion potential or that fox guarding the hen house scenario.
What's interesting to me is if you have a contractor, let's just say a subcontractor, they're small. They're getting started. They're under $5 million revenue. There's a gentleman in here we're going to talk to later. There's companies out there with less than $1 million are getting started. How in the world could that spend be handled by a company like that? Is there a way to do it without it being that expensive?
Yeah, there are affordable solutions out there, and that's actually why my company came into existence primarily, is to ensure that people have the ability to get the security that's right for their organization, to protect that information that needs protecting at an affordable rate. Now, I'm not going to say that there aren't other solutions out there, because there are, but so many of them are unachievable, especially in a do-it-yourself kind of scenario.
Go through that for me a little bit.
Yeah, because you're looking at around $250,000+ hiring on another security professional who actually understands this stuff, because there's different levels of expertise for these professionals. It can be very daunting for a small business or a subcontractor to make this happen. And so they're going to have to find trusted partners that they can work with to help them provide either an entire solution or pieces of the solution that they think are right for them.
You know, that brings up a pretty good point. We had talked about this before today's podcast. Ben and I had asked Ben, I said, how do you know a good consultant from a bad consultant? It's almost like the Wild West. There's so many things going on with fear of ransomware, malware. Let's just talk about a rogue employee. So there's so much to handle. And then we're coupling that with cost of compliance, monitoring the system. Can you understand where the CXO is saying, holy cats, what kind of responsibility do I have here? I mean, if you could, looking at me as a CXO, for instance, let's just change roles. What would you say to me about that?
I would say to you, if we're going to go down this contracting path or continue down this contracting path, we need to figure out how to get this in place ASAP. Again, for the same reasons that we mentioned before, it's the right thing to do. It's a national defense play. We're obligated under our contract and U.S. Code 10, the law, to fulfill these requirements in order to maintain the safety of this information. It's funny that you used the Wild West, because I mean that's really what this is. We have bad guys out there who are trying to get to this information as a course of business for themselves, and we have no certain sheriff in town. We have to band together to protect ourselves and everything that we deem important to us.
And with that in mind, you know, the analogy about there's a sheriff in town. Who's going to be the sheriff here? If we don't do this, or these companies decide, you know what, we're going to roll the dice. What would happen?
Well, there actually are a few companies who've already done that, and they lost their contracts and the ability to contract. So we have the DoD IG, the Office of the Inspector General, who is doing some of the audits for NIST 800-171 compliance. And we also have a memo from Ellen Lord, who is the Undersecretary of Defense, saying that they're going to reserve the right to penetration test, that is, forcibly test those systems that may house CUI to see if they are actually fully compliant.
Did they give a timeline on this?
Actually, it's the timeline, the grace period is passed.
No kidding. If you, let's go ahead and I want to wrap this segment up because I'm assuming a lot of the folks already know about NIST 800-171. Just for a few minutes here, let's wrap this up by asking you this question. How would a company get started? What would be that first step?
The first thing you need to do is you need to ask yourself, do I even need to be NIST 800-171 compliant?
Really?
Absolutely. If you are selling just commercial off the shelf to the government, chances are you don't have to follow all of these rule sets. That's the first thing that you need to ask. Second, you need to make this a business decision. You're either going to do this because you're making a significant amount of money from your contracting, or you're not going to do it because it's going to cost you more than you're going to be able to get out of it.
Gotcha. Well, what I'd like to also say is that Ben Brooks from Beryllium InfoSec Collaborative out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, has been our expert today on NIST 800-171. We're going to conclude this segment, and we're going to also offer you up two more that's going to be part of our podcast for this series. And the next part of it is going to be, what have you seen, Ben? What are some things out there that we could talk about? And then our third segment is going to focus on a template for success. This is Brian Smith with Risk GovCon, a podcast dedicated to government and defense contractors, all things being business development, risk, insurance, and contractual compliance. Thank you.
Remember to join us for our upcoming second episode of the Risk GovCon podcast as we continue tackling the myth of NIST compliance with our expert guest, Ben Brooks of Beryllium InfoSec Compliance. Until then, I'm your host, Brian Smith.